The Lost Property Office by James R Hannibal, Chapter 48. Jack sprang up, following Gwen in the race to the other side, pulling Sadie with him. The failing bridge carried them sideways, bending over unto the river's flow, and the iron plates at the end began to tear away from the stone. "Jump!" shouted Jack. All three made a final, desperate leap for the passage and tumbled into a heap on the stone floor. "How cool was that?" Sadie sat atop her brother, holding her lantern high. Jack set his sister aside and got up in time to see the remains of the bridge sink beneath the water. The carriage floated off into the darkness, with Shaw staring blankly after it, stranded on the other side. "Oh, well done," shouted Gwen. "What do you think will happen when this hits the sewer lines, The ministry shouldn't have left it hanging there, should they?" Shaw gave her a shrug. "Bound to go sometime. Miracle no one was hurt." Jack screwed up his face. "Right, a miracle. You're welcome." He gestured at the remains of the bridge. "You've cut off our escape, genius." But Gwen leaned close to his ear. "Don't worry, there are other ways out of the keep. Locked doors are easier to manage from the inside. That's what Uncle Percy always says." She turned back to Shaw, raising her voice over the pound of the waterfall. "We'll have to carry on without you. We'll find the Ember and then meet you at Baker Street Station, quick as we can." "Quick as you can," Shaw nodded his agreement, but his words sounded more like a warning. He backed away into the darkness. Jack stared after him for a few seconds, then turned from the river and followed Gwen and Sadie into the new passage. "How do we know Shaw isn't running back to Mrs. Hudson right now to sell us out?" "We don't," Gwen shrugged, looking over her shoulder. "But he's been dying to bring you in ever since the clockmaker's beetle interrupted him this morning. I think he'll wait a little longer so he can finish the job in person and perhaps nab the Ember in the process." A dozen reflections of orange flame flickered on the wet floor at the far end of the tunnel, where soft light poured in from an open chamber. "Maybe he won't get the chance," said Jack, slowing his pace. "It looks like someone left the lights on for us." Gwen pushed ahead. "Gas lamps, always burning. No need to worry. Not yet, anyway." If the original entrance to the Ministry of Trackers had been designed to intimidate and impress, the builders had succeeded. A broad path stretched from the mouth of the passage across a monstrous cavern of green pools and dripping stalactites. On the far side, a 5-story wall of black granite blocks stood exposed, curving away at the edges as if a Gothic tower had crashed into the earth, drilling down through the middle of the cavern. Jack read the Latin phrase engraved above the huge double doors. Populus Thessarium Refero. People, treasures, answers, Gwen proudly translated the motto. "We find them." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Treasure?" "Not all treasure is gold and silver, Jack. I should think you had learned that by now." One of the two doors was bronze and stood partially open. The other was cut from a giant slab of opalescent quartz, polished to a glassy shine. Jack didn't have to ask the reason for the two materials. One door could tell a tracker exactly who had passed through it in the last few days, maybe weeks if he was skilled. The other, he assumed, had a deeper memory. "Is there some place where the Buckles family kept their stuff?" he asked, ushering Sadie through the doors. "A storage room, or a locker, or something." "A locker?" Gwen snorted, following Sadie inside. "Right, something like that." The grand hallway beyond the entry had the feel of abandonment. Once a broad thoroughfare for important Londoners in need of the ministry's services, now a forgotten back alley of the keep. "Everything's wood," breathed Jack, running a hand along the carved molding. "That's for the trackers, I get it. The chamber was the same, and the tracker collection. You can't have your primary employees confusing visions with reality every time they lean against a wall." "Precisely. They might do something crazy, like play chicken with a train." Jack ignored the jibe. His attention was fixed on the dusty odds and ends cluttering the shelves built into the walls. Framed medals, swords, and spyglasses on brass stands, and old photographs. His brain registered a face he recognized. Jack saw his mother. He stepped closer, zeroing in on the picture. Mary Buckles was barely out of her teens, seated in the front row of a small group. "Gwen, who are all these people with my mom?" "Your mom?" For all her knowledge about Jack and the ministry, Gwen seemed genuinely surprised. She rushed to his side. "That can't be right. Where?" "Front row, third from the left. That's definitely Mum." "I've seen this picture before." Gwen pulled the photo from the shelf, pointing to a man with sandy hair and freckles like hers. "That's Uncle Percy, and the rest are quartermasters, class of 2000. She slowly lowered the picture. "And Jack, the woman seated third from the left, is Mary Fowler. She was your father's first quartermaster." He pursed his lips. "No, That's Mom, and her maiden name is Smith, Mary Smith. She didn't meet Dad until he immigrated to New York 15 years ago. Right. Gwen gave him an ironic chuckle, and I'm sure that's what the ministry believed as well, but I'm betting that story is a lie. You're telling me my mom was part of the ministry too? Gwen placed the photo back on the shelf, angling it just so. Not just part of the ministry, Jack, the daughter of another Tracker family. Ministry royalty, if you will. Jack paced back towards Sadie, who was too busy examining the knickknacks to follow the conversation. If Mom knew about the ministry, why didn't she go to the lost property office the moment we arrived in London? Even as he uttered the question, Jack realized his mother had known. Of course she lied about where she had gone. She had been lying to him his whole life. His eyes narrowed. Gwen, did you see my mom yesterday? No one has seen Mary Fowler for 15 years. She quit, disappeared, and now we know why. There are rules about this sort of thing. Jack didn't like the tone in her voice. What sort of thing? Marriage, Jack, within the Tracker ranks. Section 8, Rule 6. The Tracker bloodline shall never be joined under any circumstances. Never, Jack. Gwen joined him in this circle of light from Sadie's lantern. The ministry fathers understood the potential of Tracker abilities, and they were deathly afraid of what the union of two Tracker lines might produce. Produce. Jack repeated the word. Wait, you're talking about me. I'm the genetic freak they feared. He drew in a breath. Is that why I can see ghosts? You can see ghosts? Exclaimed Sadie, so loud that her voice echoed down the hall. The other two turned to shush her. Yes, said Jack. No, said Gwen at the same time. They frowned at each other. Sadie held the lantern up to her brother's face. Cool. Jack pushed the light down again. Mom and Dad broke the rules. That's why she disappeared and changed her name, so she could marry him in secret. Why would she do that, knowing that what it might do to her children? Sadie smiled up at him. Why don't you ask her? Mom's not here, Sadie. Jack was sure he had experienced this conversation before. His sister gave him an incredulous look she'd given that morning in the cafe. Of course she is. She's right here, in this building.